Back now with our politics buzzboard. Topping the list, 2016 Republicans kick off the week weighing in on that firestorm over Indiana's religious freedom law.
No one here is saying that it should be legal to deny someone service at a restaurant or at a hotel because of their sexual orientation.
Governor Pence has done the right thing.
But with critics calling it a license to discriminate, Governor Mike Pence backtracked and changes were made. Our Facebook centimeter showing the uproar didn't hurt Pence on the site. Let the ad wars begin. Senator Ted Cruz releasing his first 2016 commercial this weekend.
And that is why I'm running for president of the United States.
And Hillary Clinton's second run looking more inevitable, signing a lease in this Brooklyn office building, a likely campaign headquarters. On a Brooklyn visit, reporters asking, will she be back?
All in good time. All in good time.
You just heard it's been such an explosive week for Indiana. And with the Final Four underway, how are fans in Indianapolis reacting to the controversial law? Let's check in with ABC's Alex Perez for the very latest from college basketball's biggest event. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, Martha. Everyone's still talking about that big upset, Wisconsin wiping out Kentucky's perfect record. The stage now set for the big championship showdown here Monday night, Wisconsin taking on Duke. Now, there could have been an entirely different focus here if Indiana lawmakers had not rushed to pass changes to the state's new Religious Freedom Restoration Act to ensure businesses were not granted license to discriminate against gays and lesbians. Now, Republican Governor Mike Pence wasting no time approving those changes Thursday after days of protests and after major corporations threatened to stop doing business with the state. Even the coaches from the Final Four teams issuing a joint statement and putting pressure on the governor to act. And while the revisions to the law have been lauded by many, demonstrators are not done here. About 500 gay rights activists taking to the streets outside Lucas Oil Stadium before the semifinals yesterday. Now, those demonstrations expected to continue as we look forward to that big championship game Monday night. Martha?
Thanks, Alex. And the roundtable is here. ABC political analyst Matthew Dowd, Democratic strategist Donna Brazile, Associated Press White House correspondent Julie Pace, and our own White House correspondent Jonathan Karl. Good morning to all of you. And I'm going to start with you, Matt Dowd. You wrote this week that the religious freedom law is fascinating, disturbing, and sad. But let me read you what Ron Brownstein wrote in the National Journal. He thinks this could be the biggest landmine facing Republicans. He said Pence's agonies underscore the challenge Republicans face reconciling the demands of their culturally conservative base with the evolving realities of an America steadily growing more diverse, secular, and tolerant. That widening gap may be the biggest obstacle to Republican hopes of recapturing the White House next year. Agree?
I think it makes it difficult when you get involved in a cultural war. It makes it easier for a primary, but more difficult in a general election and where the country stands today. To me, the reason why I thought this was both fascinating and sad and disappointing is that these issues drop into the body politic, and because there's this underlying boiling going on that we don't see, they drop in, and then everybody gets polarized. And to me, the thing that disturbed me the most about this is that you people couldn't say you could be a person of faith who goes to church, who prays to God, and tolerant and compassionate at the same time. And the other part of this that I think was disturbing to me was how big business responded in somewhat, I think, a hypocritical way. They criticize Indiana, but they do business with China and Saudi Arabia. To me, it's ultimately, if you're going to do that, then do it worldwide, not just in Indiana.
I think it says a lot that the Republican candidates rushed to embrace a law that on its face looked discriminatory. And then, the governor himself had to backpedal. So I think the old ways of doing business and doing politics with having these cultural wedge issues, those old days are over. And now these candidates got to embrace that this is a different America, an America that want to be more inclusive, more diverse, and there's no place for discrimination at the table.
And John Karl, the Washington Post, just back to those cultural wars, said a debate the GOP wanted to avoid. Indiana controversy draws 2016 contenders back into those culture wars. No more foreign policy, a lot of that going on.
Yeah, and they look terrible. And the problem here is this divides the Republican coalition right in half. Evangelicals on one side, the business community on the other, exactly what they can't afford to happen in a general election. But I will say this, Martha, what is the end result of all of this? You will now have in several states civil rights for gays and lesbians codified into law as a result of the backlash over what cultural conservatives tried to do in Indiana. Not exactly what they wanted to see happen.
And John, quickly on Jeb Bush. He seemed to backpedal on this during the week.
He was exactly where Pence was. So fully supportive of the initial signing of the law and fully supportive of the revision to the law. So you get to both be seen as intolerant by some and as a squish by others.
And Julie, Matt mentioned big business. Now, traditionally, you've got business supporting the Republican Party, but this time Walmart, and it made a huge difference.
Big business is what I think drove the changes that you saw in Indiana and then in Arkansas.
And Georgia's interview.
Exactly. I mean, that was a fascinating interview, though, to put someone on the spot like that over and over again and not see a clear answer. And I think that we saw this with business also on the immigration debate. Big business's willingness to speak out against things that the Republican Party is doing that they think are counter to their goals here. I think the question we have to ask and what we have to watch going forward is what will that do in terms of who the Republican Party nominates? Because we've seen business push back, and yet candidates who may be closer to the Tea Party wing, the more conservative wing, still can emerge. But big business is showing that they are not going to put up with this.
And back to you, Matt Dowd. Every Republican in the latest Washington Post ABC poll has higher unfavorable ratings than favorable ratings in this latest poll. Doesn't look so good. You don't really want to start out that way, huh?
Well, it's a really interesting thing, I think, the dynamic that's being laid out for 2016, because on one side, you have a whole series of Republican candidates. Right now, I still think there's an opportunity, because of those numbers you read, that another candidate or two is going to get in this race because nobody's coalesced it. So you have Republicans who look like they can't get elected running against likely a woman, Hillary Clinton, who looks like she can't get elected because of the environment she is, because of Barack Obama's low approval ratings, because 2/3 of the country think we're on the wrong track, because 2/3 of the country think we want different policies. So we have these two forces, not unelectable Republicans versus an environment that doesn't favor Hillary Clinton, and somebody has to win.
And on that, Doug, let me give you the latest on Hillary Clinton's popularity. January 2013, 67%. March 2015, 49%. In other words, she had a 67% favorability rating as Secretary of State, but it's dipped down to 49%. Is she a different person? I covered her as Secretary of State. She's back in campaign mode for sure.
Well, I mean, that reflects the polarization in the country. And, if this was a People's Choice Award, she would win hands down in comparison to the Republicans. Look, Hillary Clinton is likely to be a candidate. We know that. She is going to have to draw sharp differences with her Republicans, as well as make sure that no one comes from the left to challenge her on the Democratic side. If she's ready and not rusty and ready to talk about these issues, her numbers will only go up.
And Julie, but she has been embracing President Obama's policies, it seems.
She has.
Strategy?
She has. I mean, there was a lot of discussion over the past couple of months that she would be looking to run away from the president. She's actually aligned herself both on foreign policy, both on the economy. The economy is getting stronger. I think she will show some breaks with him. I think the Iran deal is going to be fascinating to watch how she tries to maneuver there. But if the economy...
And her relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a huge amount of politics involved in that. But I think that if the economy stays strong, we saw a rather weak jobs report last week, but if the economy stays strong, I think you will see her align herself more with the president.
And she has no choice in the primary to do this, even if she doesn't have
Absolutely.
one. President Obama's approval rating may be low overall, below 50% overall, but among Democrats, it's sky high. If she wants to prevent a challenge in that primary, she has to fully embrace the president.
John Carl, I want to turn to Iran very briefly here, but also to Senator Robert Menendez, who was indicted on corruption charges. He pleaded not guilty to counts of bribery, corruption, fraud, and he is temporarily stepping down as the ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee right as Iran comes up. He was the principal critic of the president on Iran. So will it make a difference?
Well, if you had written this in a House of Cards script, it would have been thrown out as, and the idea that the president's most prominent Democratic critic, most powerful Democratic critic of the Iran deal goes down, indicted just before the deal is announced. Nobody's suggesting there's a connection, but it sure does have an impact, and it will make it harder for Republicans to get a veto-proof majority to challenge this Iran deal. No question about it.
And Julie, so what does the White House do now?
I think you're going to see a very aggressive campaign. You've had several administration officials calling lawmakers. There's going to be briefings. The biggest thing that the administration did for themselves that is going to help them is that the agreement, the framework that we saw is broad. It has specifics in it. It's not just an agreement to continue talking. And you've seen a lot of people who had been on the fence on this or even opposing the talks coming out and saying this is actually better than we expected. You're gonna just see constant contact with the Hill trying to hold off a vote.
But there's going to be a big challenge to this because the president will go to the United Nations right after a deal is done to get UN sanctions lifted, and he won't be going to Congress to get a vote.
Yeah,
that's going to be a political
I want to say on Robert Menendez, there should be a presumption of innocence until all of the facts, even politicians, deserve to have their moment in court. I know it's a tough issue, but on Iran, I think this president is going to consult with Congress. If Congress decides they don't like the framework, they want to derail it, they want to repeal it, then the onus is on them. But what we do know is that the American people are war weary. They don't want another war. They want diplomacy to work. And so I think this deal has some time to marinate, and hopefully it's a good deal for the country.
As we know, sometimes you get wars even if you don't want them.
That's true.